Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of our video today is Dealing with Satan. And this is section number 42 of our study of the life of Jesus based on the Gospel of Mark. And our text today is taken from Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 29. This is a very interesting story. Now, remember, in the previous section, Jesus had taken Peter, James, and John with him and gone up into the hills, and they were up there by themselves, and Jesus was transformed and had what I refer to in the video as a transcendent experience. Moses and Elijah appeared, and they talked with Jesus, and Peter, James, and John were there, and that whole thing. Now, this story occurs after they came back down from the mountain. Okay, immediately as they came back down, this was the first thing that happened as Mark is telling the story. And it's a very interesting story that involves some very important spiritual dynamics. And so let's read the text and see what it has to say. The focus that we're going to have today, and there probably could be several from this one text, but the one we're going to look at is the idea of how we can deal with Satan, what we have to understand, what we have to keep in mind, and what we have to do in order to deal with Satan and his servants who want to do us harm. So we'll begin with Mark chapter 9, verses 14, and read down through 29. When Jesus, Peter, James, and John got back to the others, there was a large crowd around them, and some Jewish teachers were arguing with them. When the people saw Jesus, they were excited and ran to him. "What are you arguing about?" he asked them. "Teacher," a man in the crowd called out, "I brought to you my son to heal. An evil spirit possesses him, and he cannot speak. Sometimes it throws him to the ground and makes him rigid. He foams at the mouth and grits his teeth. When I arrived and you were not here, I asked your followers to drive it out, but they could not." "You faithless people," Jesus said to his followers, "how long am I going to have to put up with you? Do you think I'm always going to be around to help you? Bring the boy to me." They brought the boy to Jesus, and as soon as the demon saw Jesus, he threw the boy to the ground, where the boy rolled around foaming at the mouth. "How long has he been like this?" Jesus asked the boy's father. "For a long time now. It has tried to kill him several times, throwing him into the fire to burn him, or into the water to drown him. Please, if you could do anything, take pity on us." "If I can do anything," Jesus said, "to those who believe, anything is possible." "I do believe," the man said. "Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw the crowd was beginning to gather, he rebuked the evil spirit, saying, "Spirit, you have made this boy suffer long enough, making him unable to hear or speak. I order you to come out of him now, and you may never enter him again." The evil spirit screamed a loud, piercing scream, shook the boy, and then came out of him. The boy fell to the ground and looked so bad that several people said he was dead. But Jesus took the boy by the hand and helped him up. After Jesus and his followers had gone inside, they asked him, "Why could we not drive it out?" "This kind of spirit," Jesus said, "can only be overpowered by much prayer." Now, this is a very interesting story, and there are several things that we need to keep in focus here. Now, I've already dealt in a couple of other texts with the idea of demons and demon possession and driving out demons, and I'm not going to repeat all of that stuff today because I don't have time. There's no point in going over the same thing more than a couple of times. If you didn't see those presentations, go back and look for the section on Jesus' ministry that has to do with Mark chapter 5. And there's a story there that will help us understand a good deal more about demons. But just as a very, very basic point of reference, we need to understand that Satan is not omnipresent. Satan can't be everywhere at the same time like God can. Okay? Satan was a created being. He was a very powerful angel, maybe an archangel, and he, for some reason, turned against God and began a conflict between good and evil, between God and Satan. Okay? Now, his goal is to hurt human beings and to destroy as many as he can, pull them away from their relationship with God, and create as much pain and suffering and wreak as much havoc as he can in the world. Now, why would he want to do that? I don't know. He just, something inside was not right, and he gave in to negative feelings, and he became hateful and bitter and evil, and all he wants to do is hurt and destroy. Now, he must have been a very powerful angel, because many of the other spiritual beings, many of the other angels, thought that he actually had a chance at defeating God, at winning this war between good and evil. And they followed him. They turned away from God and followed Satan. We call those angels demons. Okay? They're spiritual beings who serve Satan instead of God. That's what they are. And since Satan can't be everywhere at once, he cannot be where I am, tempting me and harassing me and tormenting me, and where you are, tempting, harassing, and tormenting you. He can't be in two places at once, let alone be everywhere at once. He can't do that. Only God can do that. So Satan has to use his servants to accomplish the work that he wants to accomplish. So he sends out demons into the world. And I personally believe, I can't, prove this. The Bible doesn't say this. This is just my opinion. But I believe that he does something like assign a given demon to each person, and that those demons, follow us around to tempt us and harass us and lie to us and torment us and try to cause as much confusion and pain and suffering as they possibly can. Because when we're confused and hurting and suffering, and maybe we get angry because of all of the things that are happening, whatever, then that's when we're most susceptible to temptation. That's when they can come in and tell us a lie and talk us into doing something that is wrong, something we should not do. And that's one of the ways that Satan accomplishes his purpose, by sending out demons to do all of those things to us, to get us to sin and pull us away from God and break the relationship that we have with God, and lead us away from God into darkness. Right? That's what Satan wants to do. Right? And he does it through the use of demons. Now, in this particular case, there was a man who had a son who was possessed by an evil spirit. Now, usually the way most English translations read, this boy, we hear the word boy and we think 8, 9, 10 years old. Okay, but that's not what it was like in the Jewish culture. In the Jewish culture, you were a boy until you were a man, and that happened at age 30. So instead of being a child of 8 or 9 or 10, this very well could have been a grown man, what we would call a grown man of 20, 22, 23, 24 years old. But they considered him still to be a boy. All right. Now, one of the things we know about Satan and his power is that he doesn't have the power to forcibly enter us and make us do what he wants us to do against our will. Why not? Well, because we have free will, because we're self-determined people. Okay, nobody can force us to do things against our will. Satan can't, demons can't, nobody can do that. we have free will. That's what part of what it means to be created in the image of God. We are self-determined. Okay, just as God is self-determined, we are self-determined. And angels, spiritual beings, are also self-determined, and that's why they were able to choose to follow Satan rather than to follow God. Okay? So this young man, we'll call him that, was probably an old enough young man, late teens, early 20s, to have made some bad choices in his life to let Satan in. And once Satan got a hold of him, then Satan could do an awful lot of things and make this young man suffer a great deal. Now, why do I say that? Well, because we know culturally that was the case there, that you were a boy until you were 30. That's why Jesus didn't begin his ministry until he was 30. When I was in Africa, many of you already know, I was a missionary for a time in Nigeria, West Africa. And I remember when I first got there, one of the students came to me to ask a question, and his name happened to be Isa. And Isa said something about being part of a youth program. And I thought for a moment, and I said, wait a minute, what do you mean you're involved in a youth program? You mean you're leading a youth? No, I'm one of the youths. I'm one of the young men in the program. I said, Isa, I knew a little something about him already. I said, you're 34 years old. You're married. You have a wife, and you have a 9-year-old daughter. You're not a teenager. Why are you in a youth program? And he smiled and he said, yes, I know. In America, I have been told in America, youth is for young people, teenagers. But here, you are a youth until you are 40. And since I am not yet 40, I am still a youth. So I am in a youth program. Okay, well, that was news to me. I hadn't been in Africa very long, and I was still learning, and I didn't know that. All right, so he explained something to me, and that helped me understand this story. So that this young man, they called him a boy, but he probably was not a child. He was a young man old enough to make decisions, to be responsible for them, and he probably, for some reason and in some way, opened up his life and let Satan in. And once Satan got control, then Satan did some horrible things to him. So the father naturally wants the boy to be healed, brings him to Jesus. Jesus isn't there. He's up the mountain with Peter, James, and John. So we asked the other disciples, can you do anything here? And they tried, and they couldn't. And just then, Jesus was coming back. And so they tell Jesus what's going on. And he's not happy. He says to his disciples, he says, you faithless people, how long am I going to have to put up with you? Do you think I'm always going to be around to help you out? Now, excuse me. Some people have thought that these words were addressed to the crowd in general. But as I look at the context very closely and what Jesus says to them, he wasn't talking to the crowd. He was talking to his disciples. The fact is they should have been able to drive out this demon. Jesus had given them power, and they had driven out other demons. They should have been able to do this, and they couldn't. He was preparing them for a time when he would be gone, and they would be the leaders and the teachers, and they needed to be able to do this sort of thing, and they couldn't. And so he was not happy with them. But the main focus was not the disciples, it was this man and his son. And so he said, bring the boy over here. So they brought the boy over, and when the demon sees Jesus, he goes to work on the boy. The spirit world recognizes who Jesus is, even if humans don't. They do, because they know. The demons know who he really is, and they didn't like him being there, and so Jesus then speaks to the demon and orders him out. You can never go back in, and the demon, finally leaves. Then the people are dispersed, and the disciples go inside with Jesus into someone's house, And of course, they want to know, how come we couldn't do it? And Jesus says, this kind only comes out by much prayer. Now, what does that mean? Well, it suggests a number of different things. It suggests to most scholars who read this that in this world of spiritual beings, demons, that there are rankings and that some demons are much more powerful than other demons. And that seems to be the case. We look at texts like Daniel and others where it talks about the prince of the Persian kingdom, and Michael has to come with reinforcements to fight him and release this angel who could go and then talk to Daniel. It's all sorts of stuff. A lot of things that we don't know a great deal about, but this seems to suggest that there are levels of power in the spiritual world, and that this kind of demon that was harassing this young man was a very powerful one, and the apostles just didn't understand how to deal with him. And so Jesus says it takes a lot of prayer. Okay, now, what has all of this got to do with you and me today? People who live in Africa are very well aware of demons and spiritual beings and the power that's involved. And people here in America, not so much. I don't want to go so far as to say that we're going to be talking about how to drive out demons. That's not what this is about. I'm not suggesting that, people are possessed by demons and that sort of thing in the same way they were in the New Testament, although I do believe it is possible. But most of the time, when Satan gets in somebody's life and starts messing around, it's not because the person is possessed. Okay? It's simply because Satan wants to harass that person through the demon that he has assigned to that person. And so this demon lies to you, and he lies about you, and he talks bad to you about yourself. He runs you down, okay? And he causes as much trouble for you as he possibly can. Demons can invade your dreams. And I mean, if you wake up one morning, oh man, I had this absolutely horrible dream. I felt terrible. And you feel really bad and you're tired and you're drug out and everything. That very well could have been Satan harassing you in your sleep through his demon. When I say Satan, I mean Satan is the one in charge giving the orders, and the demons are carrying them out doing what he says. But that's a demon who doesn't possess you, but is there hanging around to tempt you and harass you and beat you down and make you feel bad about yourself and torment you and cause as much trouble as he can in your life. That's what he wants to do, because in those moments you are more vulnerable to temptation. And so he beats you down and then he tempts you. And in that vulnerable state, you're more likely to respond and to do what he says and not think about it. So if that's correct, and I believe it is, all right, but if that's correct, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with Satan coming to us and lying to us and lying about us and saying ugly things about us and about other people and reminding us of all of the bad things we've done and all of the bad things that people have done to us and just trying to make us angry and frustrated or making us depressed or whatever, all right? How do we deal with that? Well, I think there are a couple of easy things for us to think about. And I say they're easy to think about, but they're not easy to do, okay? First, we have to understand that all of the negative junk in your head, all right, all of the negative thoughts about yourself and about other people and the anger and the depression and the bitterness and the hate and all that, that is all from Satan. Okay? That doesn't come from God. That's all from Satan. And so you have to recognize that. You have to identify the source. The source of all the bad, horrible, ugly things in your life is Satan. And you've made a lot of bad choices, and you've done a lot of bad things and a lot of stupid things because of the influence of Satan, and you haven't identified him as a source of this evil, and you need to start doing that. You need to understand that Satan is there all the time trying to get at you. And I'm not talking about inner, demon possession like we read in the scripture. I'm just talking about everyday normal people, and Satan is there, and he's trying to get at you, and he's trying to destroy you and pull you away from God. That's what he's trying to do. Okay? So you have to identify that. You have to understand who is causing that and what the source of that is. That's Satan. It is satanic. Okay? And then you have to dismiss it. What did Jesus do when Satan was trying to get in his way? He said, "Get behind me, Satan." In other words, he said, "Get out of my way. You are not going to control the situation. You are not going to distract me. You are not going to lead me down that road. You are not going to influence me. Get out of my way. I have things to do. I have people to see. I got places to go, and you are not wanted here. Get out." That's how we deal with Satan, same way Jesus did. And what else do we learn about this from Jesus? Well, when he went to the desert right after his baptism for his one-on-one confrontation with Satan for 40 days and 40 nights, what did he do? He fasted and prayed. Why? Because he had to be so super focused on what was happening between him and Satan that he could not be distracted even for a few moments to eat. He had to stay totally focused. We aren't focused enough on the spiritual struggle that is occurring in our lives. We have to stay focused on that. And that's part of identifying and dismissing, right? When we know who's causing the problem, then we can get rid of the problem. We can tell them, "Go away, stop it. I won't listen to you. Be quiet." And see, that means we got to differentiate between God's voice telling us the good things to do and Satan's voice via the demons telling us bad things. When you're presented with a lie, where did that lie come from? Satan. When you're presented with the truth, where did that truth come from? God. Just as simple as that. You got truth and you got lies. You need to be able to distinguish between the truth and lies. That's hard to do. How do I do that? What was the last thing Jesus said in this section about about how to deal with demons like this? Very powerful demons. When the disciples said, "How come we couldn't drive him out?" Jesus said, "This kind only comes out with much prayer." The way for you to stay focused and stay aware and to have the power and the faith you need to deal with Satan effectively is to spend a lot of time in prayer. You need to pray. And you need to specifically ask God to help you be able to recognize Satan's lies when they are told to you. You need to be able to recognize the voice of evil when it gets in your head and tells you stuff. No, I'm not talking about somebody who's being, crazy or somebody who's psychotic or anything like that. All right, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the normal, everyday, living stuff where Satan comes and he says, that was a really bad thing that person said to you or did to you or whatever, and they're ugly, mean people, aren't they? You don't like them. And he tries to make us hate that person. Okay. As soon as you start to hear that or to feel that, you got to stop it. You have to identify it and dismiss it. Stop it and say, not going there. Not going there. Lord, help me. Help me to be patient and forgiving and kind and merciful. You see, you have to pray for the things you need. And what you need is to recognize who and what the demons are and what they're doing and what they're saying and how they're impacting your life. And you need to get rid of that. Get it out. Just make them go away. Just like Jesus. Get behind me, Satan. Okay? It's a simple concept, but it's really hard to do. And Satan will do everything he can to distract you, to keep you from praying to God and staying focused on spiritual things. He will distract you with anything and everything, and he knows what you're interested in, and he knows how to distract you. So you have to stay really, really focused on what is right and what is good, and you have to spend a lot of time in prayer. So, as you think about these things, and I'm saying you need to really specifically think about these things and pray about them. But in general, as you go about your life, what I always say is true and necessary. Read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.